Hello everyone, and welcome to the Biggening Corporation, episode 19. It is a toasty Friday evening in Sweden, so hopefully I won't be too brain dead during today's episode, but we have some not the most exciting work to do today, but it's important work. So what we're going to do today is we are going to finish up taking the prospect vendors that our purchasing bots were fishing up yesterday, and we're going to be able to do some things with them. For starters, we're going to fix the trades generation sequence that we were looking at yesterday. We had the situation where the bot tier was 0, and therefore it got treated as 0 across the board and 0 trades available. So we'll put a little graceful error handling in on that, but eventually we will fix our bots rather than error handle it. Then we're going to give the players the options of converting or perhaps even discarding prospect vendors, because after all, if they've got, a huge amount of suppliers that are supplying only fabric parts, a new fabric supply vendor is probably of little use to them, and maybe they want to get rid of prospects for some reason. So we'll let them have that option. That's one of those few areas where I think it's okay to put the control in the hand of the player. Much as we did with items and starting the process of locking down the item card so that the players have limited ability to make some changes to that. I think it was items. We're going to lock down vendors in a similar sort of way so that they can only set the location code. Am I thinking of that correct thing? Let's double check here before I go too crazy. No, we were already... No, alright. We had already locked down the vendor card. Cool. Don't have to do that. Excellent. Downside to working on a project one little piece at a time across a week. Alright, well, fantastic. Further proof, I don't look at this off camera. Alrighty. So then we, for the moment, also are going to... Alright, let's just dive back into our purchasing routines here for a moment. We've got our dispatching bot here on the purchasing side. We've got the fishing logic, and we ran into the situation here where it was possible that the bot we were getting was coming in as a bot tier 0, and so all of the calculations were coming in as 0, and our loop was malfunctioning. We were going to potentially have to debug that. We're going to skip that whole process. I am going to be very lazy about it, and if the bot instance that we are being handed in this dispatcher is currently set to tier 0, I am going to consider that an invalid situation, and we are going to fix it as part of this routine. And that way we don't have to worry about it. Nice and simple. If the rec bot tier is equal to 0, no, not assignment, equal to, then, and we do need to do a modify, so begin. Sometimes I wish we could single line a field setting and a modify call. That would be delightful, because we have rec.modify all, and we can say, I want to modify the bot tier to be 1. And that's a single line function call. It would be really cool if there was just a modify 1, and you could call this as a single line, and then just be like, ta-da, nice and simple, just modify the one I'm on. That'd be nice. Maybe we'll get that into ideas somewhere. But for now, we will just do our assignment as we need to do. Bot tier. There's no validation on the bot tier at this time. So we will just rec.modify. And I'm going to do a true, because if things modify our bots, then we probably want to know about it. Okay, perfect. We've got that And nice and simple. So now we should be able to bump down our setting on the purchase prospect effort. We should have error handling around the bots that are currently set to bot tier 0, which means we should get a prospect set that will have some randomly selected trades on that bot, on that prospect. So let's publish this. First publish of the day, coming nice and early in the episode. Yay. And we will go modify our setting in just a second. Come on. I occasionally think about throwing a quick publish before the stream starts just to poke the server into being awake. Maybe I'll start doing that now as the extension grows. So, heading off to our game setup. Refresh. I'm perpetually hitting the notifications bell here. I'm kind of the opinion, frankly, I would rather that little notifications bell only show up if you have notifications so that it's not there, but there's something to be said for consistency in the UI, so I don't know. Why are we not getting our game set up? What's going on here? Baffling. Game setup. BCS game setup. Administration. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure what's up with that. I have force refreshed my client here, and we obviously had some of the other... What a bizarre thing. I didn't think it was an issue with which company we were in, but... Because you can't, as far as I know, control... Well, that's just funky. I wonder if it's something about being in Cronus. That would be weird. I am not going to try to suss out that mystery right this second, because that would be... be weird. Unlike the happy ta-das, well, that's weird. It's not always fun to explore on camera. Alright, so now we've got the purchasing bots ticking along in the background still. So we should be able to head over to our prospect list. So we still have our prospects generated yesterday that were pulled from our random name pool. Let's also remember to tick the game date here so we can see some new results. I'm debating adding a little just button to that just says tick the game date, but it's alright. Adding one is not too complicated most of the time. So, if we open up our activity log, we will see with a quick descending here. So things were ticking along. I don't have any output results to display right yet for the bots that are fishing for prospects. So those are just showing up as blank descriptions. So that's a nice little, we should fix that. Okay, and let's make sure our job queue didn't die from publishing, which it looks like it might have. Try to invoke the code unit that didn't exist. Yep. When you're relying on a job queue that runs every minute and your publishing runs just a little bit sluggish, common occurrence. I'm not a big fan of the fact that the show error button, when you click on the job, is immediately buried. It's easier to get to from the list. It's not the most brilliant. I am admittedly fairly hopeful that my microphone is not picking up the small child outside who is presenting their displeasure with the world at the moment. Okay, so I cranked down my operations cost for some new prospects to get some variation. So we definitely got some results. I'm going to pop that back up real quick so we don't get an enormous horde of prospects to worry about. There we go. Okay, so we've got 5th generation Romeo. Alright, sure. And it has available the trade for item 10,002. Okay. And this one 10,003, 10,001, 10,003. Okay. And 10,005. Fantastic. So these are all bot tier 1s, so they're always going to have just a single item. And our current math based on our game setup setting is these vendors will supply a maximum of 10 orders per day, and they will only supply up to 50 quantity per order. So if we had 3 of these suppliers as our current supply list, then we know, for example, for our 1005 item, the most we could bring in is 500 a day, and then we would need to get more suppliers. So that makes sense, and that works. From a UI perspective, it might be a good idea for us to fix up the fact box to show what the item number, what this value is. And I think it's listing linked to the item table, which we haven't fixed up the code unit for when we're generating the test player companies here to copy the base material items from the master item list to the item list. So that's fine. But we are getting what we need, which is randomly selected trade items. So our bots are doing what they should be. Now we need to give some functionality around converting these prospects into suppliers, the actual vendors that we're going to want. So from a player perspective, we have we can close up that bot for the moment. We have the prospect table here and its associated trades and everything like that. My thinking is that we go ahead and put the function right on the prospect record itself to convert to a supplier, and that way we have a really easy call to it. It's not going to be the most complex code in the world. We're going to default a lot of pieces of information, and those default settings are going to be consistent across the application, so we should be alright there. Some of the things that I'm hard coding at the moment, like posting groups, we will want to move out of hard coding in these objects. So we will come back and move those into some of the posting groups that we don't have yet as fields in our game setup. But hard code for now is okay. So we don't want this to be a local procedure. We want this to be a procedure convert to vendor. There we go. And for clarity's sake, we will return the vendor number, but odds are pretty good any function calling this probably doesn't need it, but it's better to hand it back. So we're going to need to obviously work with vendors. So let's get ourselves a vendor record. There are a few different ways that we could think about. Oh, it's not a BCS vendor, it's just vendor. There are a few different ways that we could handle creating new vendors. There is a whole system in BC for templates. So if we go look at here in the config template header, we can say for the vendor table we want to default a whole array of different values, and that might be our way to go in how we, instead of having things live in game setup, we might have config templates that apply things automatically. So for example, auto vendor, something like that. This is against the vendor table. I was hoping it'd be all smart and autocomplete for us there, but sometimes config areas of the system, not so much. Anyways, 23 here. So what we can do, and the code behind these are very clever bits of code. We can choose field, and you have to drill down on the little tiny button, I believe. No? Now I feel like I'm going nuts here. Okay. Curious. I thought that was a drill down that was going to give us the field number. Do we have to customize to show the field number? I didn't think we did. That would not be very bright. How curious. Design real quick. On this part, please. Yeah, okay. What the heck? In the config template line, the field ID, which is what we need to do the drill down to select which fields we're going to populate, is not on here by default? Okay, well, that doesn't really make me want to build off of that for my own use. I will possibly swing back around to that because this is a really powerful engine. It works all by table references and field references, which if you haven't worked with are some of the more flexible ways that you can access data. So you can define a table reference and then tell it to open a specific table by ID number and then operate on fields by their numbers as well. So it's a really powerful area of the system, but not if you obfuscate the ID field that you need to drill down on. Bananas. Okay, I'm going to delete this because we don't need the template. Okay, well, then we're definitely not making use of config templates right now. Wowzers. Okay, so based on our exploration we did last week during episode 15 here, we knew that we needed to set a vendor number, name. There's some posting groups. I didn't note down which ones. That probably wasn't the brightest of me, but I didn't. And that the user potentially needs to set a location. So, real quick, let's go revisit our vendor 1 because we used it for our test purchasing, and obviously that's all posting hunky-dory, and behind the scenes we've got transactions against it. And if we look at this, the main ones that we needed for this was the Gen Business posting group and the vendor posting group. This to drive where the purchases against this go, this to drive where the accounts payables go, if I recall the combo correctly. Yeah, the purchasing GL accounts and then the payables GL accounts. So we need those filled in. A bunch of the rest of these are all automatically being populated by the rest of the process. So like, for example, invoice discount code always defaults to the vendor number itself and that sort of thing. So, okay, so we know we need number, name, Gen Biz posting, and we need vendor posting. Cool. Excellent, and that's nice and simple. Now, if I recall correctly, with the vendor table, we should be able to insert with a blank number field and get a vendor number. So let's assume that that's the case and see where it gets us. Now, we don't need to do any sort of reset on this. We are going to do a crazy thing, and just our very first line will be an insert true. That should initialize our vendor with a number, I believe. Not quite the same as auto increment, but there is a trigger for vendor that runs. So our name is going to come from our prospect, which is on our rec. Got to remember our context. Our rec.name. Now, earlier when we were generating this prospect, I realized that we potentially want some settings coming over from the prospect to carry into the record once we create the vendor or customer, and that has to do with that random entry source number. So we are also going to get random pool, which is our BCS random. I love the IntelliSense on that. Okay, so we need to if the random entry source number does not equal 0, then begin. Just on the off chance that somebody somehow builds an extension that creates a prospect in this table that is not using our random pool for some reason. I don't know why they would, but plan for the in case. So now we can, forgot, we need our random pool get. And we get our rec random entry source number. Cool. Which I think I'm going to go ahead and compound this up here into a little double function. So that way, if something goes wrong with the get, then we escape on out of here without any hiccups. There we go. Cool. Vendor address. There's not a lot of extra info on the random pool. It's just sort of a nice to have, like a fake email and a couple of things like that. And a contact name. Yes. I did that partly because later on when we do some of the reports or things, there are some parts of the system that will validate for contact and email address, and I wanted to make sure that we had something in there. So there we go. Okay, and let's see, like I said, for now, to do these game setup, we're going to do gen business posting group equal, I believe tier 1s are jam. Yep. And because vendors will always supply us with just tier 1 items in this iteration of things. So, and we, nice and simple, only have one payable system here to worry about. And now we'll do a modify true. Okay. Now, with that done, we then also talked about using the purchases. I'm a little torn between items and prices. Either will hold the information that we need. We're basically just saying for this vendor, we need to know which trades this particular, when the purchasing bots buy stuff for them, do they do this? I'm inclined to say that when we started talking about the price variability in the market space, I wanted that price variability to be a more global variable. So like if lots of people are out there buying fabric, the price of fabric generally goes up. If we did it through the vendor price table, we absolutely have a home for this information where we could theoretically do different prices. But we would then need to replicate that information across all of the suppliers that trade in that same item across all of the player companies. So in trying to decide where data lives, you need to think a little bit about how data maintains and how far-reaching an update is going to have to go. So if we were to use purchase prices to keep track of market pricing, the table makes perfect sense for it. And as an individual company and vendor unique items, this would be a great place to put it. Me, I am going to skip that, in fact, and just use the purchase items. It's a little bit pointless in that it's meant to be a cross-reference, so our item 1000 is vendor number VM2007, blah, blah, blah. And it also gives you some options about lead time calculation, as you see. But realistically, I'm just looking for the ability to say, is this item number in this vendor's list? So this table will be perfect for that. So we are going to copy our trades to this vendor item catalog table, which is oddly enough called item vendor. I'm not really sure why, but that's what they went with. Okay, that's a little backwards. So, migrate all trades to item vendor. So, in general, you'll also see that I tend to prefer to put Microsoft base objects in my list before my custom objects. Old school habit. I'm not sure if that's code cop enforced. I haven't attempted since turning it on for the demo. I haven't attempted to turn code cop back on to see how messy that's going to go. So I guess we'll find out soon, because I'm going to do that. We gotta start coding properly from in the moving forward sort of way real soon here. And okay, so trades, set range. Typically for now it's just gonna be one, but it could be more than one. So we want our prospect number and rec dot number. And for each of these trades, find set false. We're not modifying it. I also really need to spend a little more time with some of these extensions that add a lot of these great snippets, because I'm sitting here going, I know all of these then repeat untils. There's a snippet in here somewhere with my name on it that's just crying out for me to give it some love. So we are going to do item vendor dot, nice and easy here. Vendor number equals the vendor number. Super intuitive. I wonder how many times we could cram the word vendor into one line though. Let's see, and then item number. You'll notice that this does support variants, and that is not on the page. With item variants, you'll find that's common throughout the system. I'm not sure how complicated it is in the base product to turn on variants if you're going to use them. That could get really interesting. I know that was a little easier in earlier versions, I think, but that's fine. In our case, I think, just double check here. Okay, so yeah, primary key is item number, vendor number, and variant. Variant is always blank, so we're fine. We're not going to fight with variants in this version. I don't envision a need for it, and we will grab the trades.trade code. It is the trades table supports a trades type option, and that is because of the customer side prospects will have different things they will want to buy, and then we will need to do some trade type checking. But because we're on the purchasing side, it will only be the item number in the trade code. So nice and easy there. And we don't need anything else. The vendor item number is not mandatory. So we can leave blank. All right. And then once we're all said and done, and this vendor it gets converted, realistically, I'm going to put it on the responsibility of the function that calls this to then decide whether or not they're going to delete the prospect from the table. There might be some valid reasons from a testing perspective not to include the function call, not to include the delete in the function call here. So let's go to our prospect list, and we are going to add a new area for our actions, which is way under here. I love all the extensions adding wizards. I admit they're making me a little sloppy and messy on my remembering the layout of the XML files. Let's see. So we are going to throw this on processing. Sure, that sounds good. I was just reviewing the tooltip here as to what area options made the most sense. So, we are going to create, we don't need a group for this. That's fine. Convert, and we'll give this a caption. I'm going to go with more simply make vendor. Short and sweet language on that. Promoted is true. Promoted is big is true. Promoted category. I hate having to set so many different properties to get this promoted, but they all make sense individually. It's just they always end up traveling in a pack here. So image equals vendor. Yeah, that's cool. When we do turn on code cop, we will need a tooltip for this button, but for the moment I'm leaving that be. Okay, and now for the prospect record, we can just do a rec convert to vendor. And I'm thinking that it would make sense that when you click convert to vendor, we want to pop open the vendor card, because the player potentially will want to set the location on that vendor card. So let's store vendor number. And that's just going to be a code 20. And yeah, we're going to need a vendor record. Okay, and now in a fine example of why I return values, because I probably am going to want them later. Okay, so we converted that to a vendor. We're going to want to then rec.delete, and we absolutely want to fire the event on that. And if I recall correctly, did I set up? Yes, table relation is set up correctly on the trades, so we should be all good on the trade cascading delete. Should be. Double check it. And then we can do page.run 0 vendor. Yep, that should be fine. So if I'm remembering my handy shortcut code logic correctly, the vendor record has on it knowledge about what pages should be displayed when we're talking about that given record. And if you pass 0 to page.run, at least in prior versions, that will use whatever page is appropriate for that vendor. But I also need to get the vendor number. And I also probably should set rec filter. There we go. So we get the vendor number back, delete the prospect and the related trades, then with that vendor, set a rec filter and run the page. Let's give it a try. It should be all working. Chug, chug, chug. Things blew up. Oh, I mentioned yesterday too, sometimes you could potentially do the ampersand table to equal, 8801 or whatever have you. When that resolves, it changes that to a temporary page number, 9599. If you press refresh on this, it will not work and it will blow up. Something went wrong. The page cannot build. So if you do run a table using the URL trick I mentioned sometime recently, know that you cannot refresh that data. You have to fix your URL all over again. So something to remember. Forgot to warn people about it. Comes up a lot if you run a table and then you hit publish and you refresh, not really thinking about it because you want your changes, and pop, error. So, good. We have make vendor. Yay! Alright, and this one's going to give us 1003, which I don't remember what item that is, but that's fine. I suspect we'll get an error. Yeah, that's the one I was expecting. So, the item number contains a value that can't be found in the related table. Makes perfect sense. What's interesting about that is we're populating a record in a table called item vendor, I think it's automatically creating a related record in a different table called item cross-reference, and the validation there is blowing things up. So let's say okay to that. Real quick, let's see. Do we have a 1000? I think 1001s are. Nope. All right. I will need to probably do a test run here on the game setup and make sure that it is still capable of picking the first record. So I'm going to crank this back down to 4 and let the game date tick over a few times in our background here, because I realized thinking about the next logic we're using for the randomizer, it should potentially land sometimes on the 1000 item, but it might not. So for now, I am going to simply manufacture the base items. I had made our 1000 item. I will make our 1002 item. We do need to update our company initialization routine to make these items. And let's see, 1002 in our master item list was, let's see, fabric, wood, metal parts. Okay, sure. Probably could have looked it up. That's fine. Inches, there's no category on this, and we need our product posting group, which this is a class 1, and we need our inventory, which is just nice and easy item. Cool. That should be that. As you can see, our purchasing bots went kind of bananas with the fabric parts, so that's good. Nice. Alright, prospect. Now, because it's nice, thank you. I'm not sure that's spelled correctly. One nurse practitioner, interesting. But I'm loving some of these random names. Crimson Neural Net Healthcare. Like, that sounds reliable. All right, sure. Often senior final analyst. Okay. Are you today? 1002 item, we had one. Yeah, it's our first one. Cool. The vendor does not exist. Identification values, blah blah blah, blank. Okay, so what went wrong? And it might just be as simple as I'm incorrect in my assuming we can just do an insert true. Looks like possibly not. Okay, so what do we need to do? Let's take a look at the definition on this. So, so we have some validation code on number that checks to see if we're changing it and checks to see if we're allowed to change it, but that doesn't help us. And then we come on down to our chunks of code. You can see this is an example of why when you start getting into these objects that are 2,000 lines long, those banner code comments are definitely my jam. I very much appreciate them. Okay, so we have to find in our logic flow here on insert. Okay, so on insert, we've got if number equals blank, try to get vendor numbers and initialize that series. So on insert true should have populated that. The only reason I could think of it wouldn't have populated that is if we missed something in our purchases and payables setup, which I suspect we... No. Okay. Well, that blew that theory out of the water before I finished saying it. Yep, we have default numbers on. Okay, so now we gotta ask ourselves the question where we're getting that pretty weird error message at this point. What about this is blowing up? We are getting the message that the vendor number blank does not exist, but we clearly saw that on insert sets that number. So the only two places I can think of where things are going wrong is the modify something is wrong with that, or our get call. And nice and easy, our get call is going to blow up. And I saw why. Maybe you guys did too. We specify that we're going to return the vendor number. Did we? No. No, we didn't. There possibly is a code cop rule that would have helped for that. I admit that hanging out in the TypeScript world, I enjoy it throws an error at me if you're supposed to be returning a value and you return nothing. But we don't have that, so whoops. So vendor number. Away we go. Publish. Okay, so that probably meant that the insert and modify and the trade conversion, all that was working. We just weren't going to get a result, and that's an example of if you run into an error while you're doing inserts and modify, unless you call commit, it rolls the whole thing back. Nice and easy, and that includes the number series. We noticed that there was no number series usage of that vendor number. So I really love the transactional protection built into this engine. Really do. Whip. That's lovely. So, okay. So what we end up with is the page.run pops open the default page for the vendor record, which in our case is the vendor list. It's a little iffy on whether that's I'm not the biggest fan of that. Let's see here. What page is this? Because this is the vendor lookup table. Oh, that's interesting. It's using vendor lookup, not the same as when we go to vendors in the list form. So that explains why when we're looking here, we're actually getting a different set of columns than I was expecting to get. I was sitting here going, responsibility center, we hid that. So it may be in our interest to look and see if there are any other list forms for this vendor and consider what the issue is. This is a really good example of customers and often business consultants, project managers will tell you, I need you to add a field to the vendor list. And you go, okay, sure. And you go to the vendor list and you look around and you go, perfect, this looks like everything they asked for. And they will come back to you and tell you it's not right at all and send you a screenshot and leave you completely baffled and bewildered. So it is very, very essential, I think, to try to get people, when they're looking for asking you as a developer to make changes to a screen, try to communicate please do me the favor of not wasting your time. Come back and do a page inspection and double check what page number that you're looking at. You never know if some previous partner or previous developer has changed the entire system in such a way that they're going to a custom vendor list, and you will tear your hair out trying to figure out what they mean until finally you find it. But in our case, we probably should just modify all of the vendor list type things. So, real quick here, if we can get our Object Designer browser to pop open, which is always a question for some reason. I love this extension a whole bunch. I admit it's high performance, but giving me some grief when I try to run things. So I may have to close and restart my Visual Code here. So yeah, we had extended the vendor list. Let's try this out for size here. If we just do vendor and look at this, we get the vendor list, but we also get vendor lookup, and yep, they might mean my vendors. And for a little while there was even a differentiation, and I think they've cleaned this up, thankfully. There was a version where they had vendor list and vendors, plural, as two separate objects. So, that was not a good time. So let's nice and simple. We'll just tackle that the known one, the vendor lookup table here. And I see. I was trying to rename. I just wanted it to give me the proper complaining about the object ID collision so that I could, potentially get a different object ID, but it's not. Okay, sure. Oh, cheeky. Yeah. It's looking at... okay. Because I had started to save the sum.al as the same exact object name, it just replaced itself here and got rid of itself. Funky behavior. I might put in a small issue on Waldo's GitHub suggesting that he watch for rename collisions. One of the beautiful things about the extension world in Visual Studio Code is you can just create issues and ask people to fix things. Okay. So what is going on here? Vendor list cannot be declared. Yeah, it's complaining because I didn't change here. That's fair. Okay, so our vendor lookup table is fairly similar to our vendor list. It had responsibility center, which I don't care about. City, zip, phone number. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm using a Kronos US database. I'm sitting here going zip. we don't have zip. Yeah. Small Swedish life thing. I remain very thankful they also use 5-digit alpha numeric zip codes in Sweden, because there are lots of US websites that when you enter payment information require you to verify your zip code, but they are not built to be multi-country aware. So thankfully, when they hand it off to the payment processor and go, hey, they gave me this 5-digit zip code, the payment processor goes, well, they gave you the right one, so you're fine. I do not envy people who do not have it quite so simple. There are some other odds and ends that are a little bit bananas. Moving from the US to Sweden, they used the European standards, as they should, for phone numbers, and it's a very different experience from the US-based phone numbers, so that was crazy. Okay, trying to figure out how to format things was nuts. So, here in our purchase items, 1002. Great. Okay, so now we've got a new vendor in here, and we could, and I think should, go assign some of our purchasing bots that are currently farming along for us to that new vendor. Let's do it. As I mentioned, at the moment, for ease of testing and everything, I'm leaving this list just straight up editable rather than anything else. So, there we go. Now, our purchaser bots are going to work just fine, but I believe we have them hard-coded as part of just testing that they work. I believe they're just using the item number, 1000. So right now, as it stands, these purchasing bots are going to start to buy fabric parts from our metal parts supplier, and that's no good. But now we're going to be getting into the area where we need to start thinking about how the player is going to control what the purchasing bot should buy. So for example, I have an enormous amount of fabric on hand, depending on how much customers are going to order and whatnot. So we really should have some way of we're going to need to fix this up here. The player should be able to specify what the reorder point parameters are and everything like that. We should be able to say what is the maximum inventory level that we want to acquire to. So, reorder quantity won't make a whole lot of sense, I think, in what we're doing. I think that we should offload that logic to the bots, because each bot at its tier and the supplier in its handling of things, all of those are going to be driving what the quantity of things are going to be reordered. But let's see. Let's do... the reordering policies here aren't going to matter a whole lot. This is mainly used for the much more complex, what's it? I know the abbreviation's MRP, Master Resource Planning, I think. They're no, MPS, Master Purchasing Scheduling, something like that. There's a whole really powerful engine under the hood for this reordering policy. And the more I think about it, the more I think that this tab is the right idea of what we want, and that we should have what point of which we want to start ordering more. You know, we get down to 200, we should order more, and we should order up to the point where we have 1,000. Like, so a minimum, the reorder point and the maximum inventory both make sense, but since it's tied to such a high performance, complex purchasing engine, I don't really know exactly what about these fields might give us some trouble. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a little side venture, and we are going to tidy up the item card for our application and hide a lot of data. Some of these groups in their entirety can just be hidden from the player. There's no benefit to showing them. They are going to be set automatically. So, for example, prices and sales. Now we might want to provide that info. Okay, so really just replenishment and planning don't make a whole lot of sense to show. There's nothing that the player is going to control on that. We're gonna want to shut off item tracking and warehousing as well, and then we'll also need to spin around to what we had done on the vendor card, which is restrict which things are going to be editable. So I'm thinking a new group right under the item card will be a really good thing for us to tidy up. So let's take advantage of something I mentioned in my previous video, so that way we're not using up too much of our last 10 minutes for me just hiding things. We can do design on this page, and we can say I don't want the service item group. I don't want, come on, designer initializing. So I don't want the automatic extended text up here. Players, I don't think, should be able to block items. We're going to go ahead and remove that. We don't need to worry about G10. We do want item category code. I think there's a benefit to that, but we are not going to have any service-based item types or non-stock item types, so we can get rid of that. And we will... I'm not 100% sure this is going to be faster than me coding it at this stage, but we'll go with it. Okay, I'm going to tidy up the inventory tab separately a little later on. Let's leave costing information showing for the moment as a section. I'll skip over that, and then replenishment. Now, from the designer, can we... Oh, okay. I was hoping that in the designer we could say this whole section should go bye-bye. We can't. What a bummer. I will submit that to Microsoft Ideas sometime in the near future. Designer is otherwise pretty powerful. So if we just say stop designing, and we say, I don't know, designer item layout, and Biggening. Sure. And we'll download the code. It didn't do what I was hoping it would do. Just being able to hide some of those would have been better. So now if we open up the... Yeah, don't have an extension. I haven't bound .al to Visual Studio Code because often that would change my project. Real quick, gonna drop that to my desktop, and off camera here I am gonna copy this code, and we are going to create a core extension. I did notice in an update that there are starting to be the extension types. I haven't updated my extension for the AL wizards here, so table extension is definitely a new type in there. I suspect there are more coming, but for now we're just going to do some .la. Page extension. I was working in a multi-extension root workspace earlier today, and it completely has thrown me off my game because the autocomplete for the IDs doesn't work in a multi-root extension because it doesn't know which context yet to assign the ID from. Messy. This is going to be item card, and great. So nice and simple. The page extension that I downloaded, the little AL file, if I copy that in here, boom, just looks like this. Nothing too crazy. It just was all of the visible falses from my clicking through. I don't honestly know that saved me that much time, but that's fine. Okay, so much like the vendor card where we added after general a new player information and settings, I'm going to do the same section name. Let's be consistent, and I like the idea of always having that be the second group, so that way players know where to look every time. So that's fine, and it's not called general on the item, it is just called item. Okay. Happen to know that I was modifying an item card earlier today. So, okay, great. And I don't think we have to do anything with the group level. Perfect. Okay, so on the item card, I'm going to leave most of that alone, and I think we are going to make some new settings on the item table that we're going to expose here that are going to be our reorder point for the game and the maximum quantity to carry as a balance for the game. Yep. And that extends item. So I'm going to be a little lazy here and copy because I like the layout of this. There we go. So and for clarity's sake on this one, since I'm extending and I'm naming something the exact same as a base field, that's always dangerous. I'm tempted to give it a different caption. You know, let's do a slightly different name so that way we can't mess ourselves up too badly, and it's immediately like if someone Googles on reorder level, they're gonna get a bit of a there isn't a reorder level field. And then I'm thinking we'll call this one slightly different in the same sort of way. Instead of maximum inventory, we'll call it maximum stock, just to differentiate the two. Cool. Okay, and reorder. Great. Cool. And now we can add those up here onto our player information settings. Yay! BCS, reorder level, and maximum stock. When we're later doing the calculations on the maximum stock, we will have to make an interesting decision on how we want to handle that. For example, does stock only look in the warehouse, or does it look based on sales and purchasing demand? So that's going to be a fun question, because we could potentially get ourselves in a situation where the purchasing bots are ordering, and if we don't take into account purchases and the logistics bots are not keeping up in the receiving process, and trucks are virtually piling up outside the warehouse door, then we could end up with a lot more ordered than we ever should. So that's going to be something we're going to have to watch out for. Okay. Little refresh. So we should be in good shape in our next episode to adjust the purchaser bots to buy based on demand and buy. Interesting. Sorry, I'm just occasionally noticing some weird quirks to this. I've got my general setup set to LCY is euro, and on my roll center here, I'm seeing things in euro. And if I go to my vendor, vendor list, and I look at my fact box, I see my balance in dollars. What is that? I need to find out why that is. It's going to drive me bonkers. Anyway, so what we're going to do tomorrow, or Monday, what we're going to do on Monday is we are going to add some logic into our purchasing bot here to take into account the demand from the item and what we've got for inventory on hand, what we've got for sales, and what we are currently in the process of buying. So now if we look at our item card, we should have reorder level maximum stock. Great. A lot tidier. We also have a small case of duplicate extensions. Designer item layout. So this was the one I created and then downloaded the code. I don't think that the designer lets you just download the code without installing the extension, which I would prefer in a way. So let's uninstall you, because sometimes it'd be pretty great just to use a Kronos demo database, create your extension layout changes, and then download the code without installing it. I mean, that would be kind of nice. You could, in a production database, tidy things up and then install the app in a demo environment, for example. It could be useful. All right. Yes. That very much affected the page I was on. But our tabs are still all cleaned up and tidy. So good. All right. So yeah, I guess what we're going to look at in our next episode is actually making these reorder levels matter, making the maximum stock matter. We are going to make our vendor settings here where we've got the maximum orders per day and quantity per day. That should be quantity per order. That is captioned wrong. We'll go ahead and make all of those things be brought into our purchasing calculations to drive if we are even going to create an order, and what for and how many. And I guess then we will also need to handle some logic in this create line. If the bot is multi-tier, how many lines per tier is that purchasing bot going to make? I don't know. What's a logical balance here? So some fun game design questions to think about. I will also, over my weekend, will be creating a special little episode that will go up. I will mention it on Twitter, and it will be added to a separate playlist in my YouTube stream that will be a recap episode of where we are in the code over the past about 20 episodes. I will be putting that together this weekend. Try to keep it to 10 to 20 minutes. I'm going to start doing doing that every 10 episodes and try to do 10-minute recaps, 10 episodes in 10-minute kind of thing. So that way players, people who just don't have the time but are interested, can try to keep up, which of course then requires me to keep some notes about what we do in each episode, so that'll be interesting. First one, be about 15-20 minutes, just to revisit what the project is and where we are. So hopefully in our next episode, that'll be the beginning of some of the most complicated logic, where we're driving how much should we buy and when should we stop, what are the constraints, and how do we bump into them. Fun stuff. I'm enjoying this so far, and hopefully you are too. Take care, everybody, and have a good weekend.